Well, thank you for coming this evening. I'm going to be talking on this topic, assisted suicide. I hope you can hear me at the back, because if you can't, please show suitable signs of disapproval, because I tend to, as the evening goes on, speak more lightly. I think we have to apologize to Tom Clancy for the title of Clear and Present Danger, pinching that. It is a very topical issue, because I've had to change or add to my slides several times over the month. And indeed, there was an article today in the National Post by Alex Schadenberg, who I'll be referring to later, on this topic. So, if you can't read this at the back, it says, "Save the planet, kill yourself." Now, this was obviously at a rally on this topic, but I'm not sure on which side this person was. Was she an ironic tone of voice, or was she in favor of assisted suicide and euthanasia? I'm not sure. Now, this is a definition which came from the Special Senate Committee, which was held back in 1995. And physician-assisted suicide, the act of intentionally killing oneself with the assistance of another who deliberately provides the knowledge, means, or both. In physician-assisted suicide, the physician provides the means. Now, I have a problem with physician-assisted suicide, because you really don't need a physician to, well, take part in it. You could do it without a physician. And I think it's used as by the proponents of assisted suicide to give it a nice gloss of respectability. If you have a physician involved, then somehow that must be a little more respectable. This next slide is really rather a rogues gallery of physicians who have been involved in euthanasia and assisted suicide. The first one, Bob Adams, he was a physician from the north of Ireland. He was a Plymouth Brethren, which is a very strict Protestant group. And in fact, the dean of the medical school I went to in Trinity College Dublin was Plymouth Brethren. He was out of keeping with the attitude of medical students in general. His approach was not quite what we had in mind as students. Now, Bodkin Adams didn't have a very successful early medical career. Then he set up family practice in Eastbourne, which is a very salubrious town on the south coast of England, which has a lot of elderly, affluent people who retire there. And he built up a very large and successful private practice. But between the years of 1946 and 1956, 160 of his patients died in somewhat suspicious circumstances. And of these, 132 had left him quite substantial things in their wills, including 2 Rolls Royces. And it was felt that at the time he was probably the wealthiest family physician in the United Kingdom. Someone eventually complained, and there was an inquiry into this. Now, he was very well connected, he was very valued with the Lord Mayor, and a lot of these patients were well connected in society. One was a relative of the Prime Minister of that time, Harold Macmillan. So the inquiry wasn't as arduous as one might have liked. Anyway, he was charged with murder. But again, the prosecution didn't take the case on with too much vigor. And there was a lot of discussion about, and the whole concept of double effect came into question, because that is well recognized and accepted in the Catholic Church, that you give a powerful medication with the concept of treating the symptoms. Now, if the side effect of that is that you hasten death, then that is acceptable. In fact, in clinical practice, people build up a tolerance to these medications, and you don't hasten death. But anyway, that was used by the defense. And certainly in these circumstances, Watkin Adams would be send the nurses out of the room and then give these special injections, after which fairly soon afterwards the patients succumbed, leaving him very well off in their wills. Surprisingly, he was acquitted, but they then nailed him on charges of fraudulent filling in of forms for donations. He wasn't looking, he hadn't got the proper documents for the narcotics he was keeping and the prescriptions he was writing. So they struck him off, he struck off the general medical register. But he was reinstated about 6 years later and went on practicing. So that was an interesting case. And then a more recent case is Harold Shipman, who was a family physician in the north of England. And it's estimated that he killed about 218 of his patients, and probably more. Now, he seems to have just done this without gaining much material benefit. But ironically, the case that nailed him was he forged the will of one of the patients, who happened to have been the Lady Mayoress or somewhere, so she was quite prominent in the local society. And for some reason he did this. So he was charged, he was found guilty, and in jail he hung himself subsequently. Jack Kevorkian is a North American example, and you know more about him and his machine. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and went to jail and subsequently died. The Canadian experience is much less exotic. We only have physicians who have been involved with individual cases, and they have all been treated very lightly by the legal authorities. Dr. Claudio de Rocha was is a thoracic surgeon who had been working up in northern Ontario, I think it was at Timmins, and he had a case who was terminally ill with cancer of the lung, and he gave an injection of potassium chloride. Now, potassium chloride is a very important constituent of the body, and you need it in very closely limited parameters. Too little is very bad, and too much is lethal. And if you give someone an injection of potassium chloride, you're going to kill them if you give them too much. And he did that in this case. And he was found guilty, but he only was put on probation. Nancy Morrison, the case from Halifax, this was a difficult case because she had a patient who was terminally ill, and they were having great difficulty in managing the pain. The person was in severe pain, and they were giving very large doses of medication such as morphine with ibuprofen, and they couldn't control this pain. It was obviously something must have been going wrong. I wasn't getting into the intravenous or something was happening. Anyway, in desperation, she gave an injection of potassium chloride, and the patient died. And nothing happened initially, but then someone notified the authorities. So it went to court, but the judge threw the case out. He said it was unclear, with all this medication that had been given in such large amounts, as how the patient actually died. So that was Nancy Morrison. A more recent case in 2007 out in British Columbia, Ramesh Sharma gave a 93, I think it was, old lady injection which ended her life. He was charged and he was put on probation, and he had his license taken away. So those are some cases that have been happening. Now, the legal situation is the criminal code prohibits both euthanasia and counseling persons to commit suicide or aiding. And these are punishable offences, if you're found guilty, can be up to 14 years in prison. So it's not something to be taken lightly. But as was remarked in this article, and as I've mentioned, paid physicians are often treated lightly. Now, there have been many bills that Francine Lalonde from Quebec has been a very vocal advocate of changing the law. She brought several private members' bill, and the last one in April 2010 was well defeated. So, and there have been similar examples in the United Kingdom of bills becoming before Parliament. There was a discussion at the House of Lords, one of these cases, and one of their lordships in the discussion said, do you want your physician approaching you in the white coat of the healer or wearing the black hood of the executioner? A rather neat phrase to express his opinion. Interestingly, public opinion, there was a survey carried out in December in Canada, and 67% of people were in favor. In Quebec, it was 81%. So I think the proponents are now moving away from trying to get things changed by Parliament and instead going the legal route and trying to get cases through the courts. And we know that our Supreme Court has become very action-oriented in recent years. When they last discussed this back in the early 90s, the Sue Rodriguez case was defeated by only 5 votes to 4. So I think the opponents feel that if they can get this back in front of this Supreme Court, then they may get a ruling in their favor and put pressure on Parliament to change things. And at the moment there are 2 cases before courts. One in British Columbia, where the Carter family, with one member of them actually went to Switzerland and they had 4 assistant suicides. They want to change the case here. And the case itself, a patient called Taylor, who has amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, motor neuron disease, where they lost where the patient loses movement of the muscles. And this is supported by the BC Civil Liberties Association. And the judge is supposed to give a ruling on that any day now. So as I say, this constantly, this topic changes. And there is a case before the courts in Quebec of a patient who belonged again to the same disease. In the United Kingdom, they have at least 2 cases at the moment. And these are very difficult cases because they both, one Nick Crimson case and the other patient called Martin, it hasn't been identified in other ways. And they have the locked-in syndrome, which is a very, very unpleasant condition. This due to a major cerebrovascular accident means that the patient is completely paralyzed, but they're conscious, and they have great difficulty in communicating. They may be able to communicate with the eye movements, and that's about it. So these are very different cases. And obviously, they can't have assisted suicide, because assisted suicide, you just provide them a means of doing it. These would have to be, cases would have to be euthanized. And both of these are going before the courts at the moment. Also, there have been all sorts of reports in favor of assisted suicide. We have a report from the Royal Society of Canada in November 2011, And makes very difficult reading. It was written by PhDs for PhDs. Certainly I had a lot of trouble trying to make head or tail of it, but they come down in favor of assisted suicide. And in UK they've just had the Faulkner Commission, which again is in favor. And most recently, just this month, a committee of the Quebec legislature on death with dignity again has come out in favor of assisted suicide. So you've got public opinion and you've got these various committees, but with the parliaments holding firm so far. And of course, in the field of media, films and documentaries, we have the Barbarian Invasions, which were filmed from Quebec a few years ago, which was a case of assisted suicide. The Sea Inside, a Spanish film, same topic, $1 Million Baby from the States. And then various TV documentaries, The Suicide Tourist from Canada, which reviews a case of an American who lived in the UK, knew it, again, I think he had motor neuron disease, and went to Zurich and followed that. And then Terry Pratchett, who has Alzheimer's disease. And then you can find the various items on YouTube about this. And then another was the short stay in Switzerland, which was shown on TV Ontario. So all, some of them impartial, but some of them obviously moving in favor of this. So again, so the public are becoming increasingly aware of the issue and an increasing momentum to push in favor of at least assisted suicide, if not out and out euthanasia. Now, in the United States, Oregon, through their Death with Dignity Act, has permitted physician-assisted suicide for 14 years. And Washington State approved a similar act in 2008. And in Montana, there has been a legal decision about this, about one case that it was okay, but they said this didn't guarantee assisted suicide for everyone. That case I find it difficult to quite interpret. The proponents say that now you can have assisted suicide in Montana, but I'm not quite sure. In Massachusetts, there's talk of holding a referendum later in the year on this, and in Vermont and Hawaii, they've had attempts to have this legalized several times, and they're still at it. We look at some of the results of this, and Oregon puts out a report each year, just starting off with one from 2004, and there were 37 deaths and 60 prescriptions written. Now the reasons I think are interesting, because when you think of assisted suicide, you think of unbearable suffering, pain, and things like that. But the reasons people give aren't about pain. It's about loss of autonomy. Autonomy has become so important in North America, and a lot of that is the good, moving away from the old patriarchal approach in medicine in particular. The doctor knew what was right and he did what the doctor said, to people taking decision-making to themselves. But then this concept that you must, if you lose autonomy and aren't able to do things, then you should end your life. If you can't participate in activities you could previously. And the question of loss of dignity, that really begs the question of what is dignity. And as has been said, that loss of dignity in our society is equated with sphincter control. That's the higher thing put on it than that. Now the medications used are usually short-acting barbiturates, pentobarbital 68%, secobarbital 32%. These used to be very popular in medicine before we had better drugs for helping people sleep as tranquilizers, and now they have this use. half the patients were unconscious for 5 minutes and half dead within 25 minutes. However, there have been problems, and they don't usually highlight these. These can cause people to vomit, and that causes problems. And there have been cases that have been conscious, and then have woken up a day or so later, and not at all pleased to wake up and find themselves in familiar surroundings. But as I say, these things are usually very Now, by 2008, the number of prescriptions had risen to 88, with 54 taking them, given results. 22 died from underlying disease, so obviously those people really were terribly ill, and there's no question about it. By 2011, last year, it had gone up to 114 prescriptions, of whom 71 took medications. So you can see there had been a leveling off during the latter part of the decade. Now it's on the rise again. And then we have Washington State are now starting to put out their annual reports. So they've got 87 prescriptions in 2010, with 51 taking medications and 15 dying from overdoses. And again, the reasons aren't from unbearable pain, symptoms such as that, loss of autonomy again, activity participation, and dignity. So these are more not the sort of things that fall readily in the medical domain of the way we treat symptoms. These are more existential type issues. Now, Switzerland has had assisted suicide for many years, and they didn't say that a physician had to be involved. And in fact, for many years, the Swiss Medical Association opposed physicians taking part. But there was this Dignitas, the Right to Die group, set itself up in 1998. And if you've watched any of these documentaries, you see that it takes place in a very unprepossessing apartment in an ordinary building in Zurich. It's the founder of this, Ludwig Manelli, is a lawyer, and he apparently has become very wealthy from doing this. And they've had over 1,000 deaths up to 2009, and 114 in 2011, below a 35% increase. And most of the people who have become, and this is for foreigners, they have another exit group which deals more with Swiss people. This is mainly for foreigners, mainly Germans, and then Britons, and I think there have been 9 Canadians who have gone there. It's not cheap, 4,000 euros to have this in essence simple procedure, and 7,000 euros if you want the whole package for them taking care of the cremation things. And I think there have been some complaints of Manelli for having all the ashes thrown into one of the local rivers, and people are concerned about it. Now, there was the old adage about seeing Naples die from Virgil about 2,000 years ago. I think this is taking things a little too literally. See Switzerland die. And the government got a little upset, and I'm sure the Swiss Tourist Board wasn't keen on all this either. So they had a referendum asking the Swiss people if they would like to ban this, or at least have residency requirements of 6 months or so to cut down on this. And it was defeated. So the Swiss were quite happy for people to come and use their country for this purpose. Now, I want to talk about the slippery slope concept and look at what's happened in other countries. And in fairness, in Oregon, they've had it for 14 years, and there hasn't been any move to try and move on to euthanasia. And the efforts in the United States have been more to have physician-assisted suicide recognized. But in the Netherlands, for many years, and was more formalized in 2002, euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide will not lead to prosecution if certain requirements of due care are fulfilled. The person's got to be terminally ill, unbearable suffering, or have well, it's not terminally ill actually. They've got to have unbearable suffering. They've got to have a medical condition. They've got to willingly ask for this, and there've got to be two physicians involved. And then if you follow the certain guidelines, you won't be prosecuted. And Belgium and Luxembourg have followed this lead. And they're just looking at, when you're looking at the results from this, you always, governments, I think, always play down the negative aspects of it. In Luxembourg, the Grand Duke refused to sign the legislation. I mean, he's required by law to sign off as the head of the state, but he wouldn't do it. They still went ahead with the legislation anyway. And I talked about Switzerland. Now, talking about what is reported and what is actually happening is very interesting. This was a paper written in 2004 by Fenixten, who is an opponent of it. And he found that the number of patients who died by lethal overdose was 28,000 out of 740 deaths. Now this is a very high figure, because I'm going to show you some of the reported cases of euthanasia, which is much less than this. I was trying to figure out why this discrepancy, which is very high. And I think it is because that it's not illegal to be treating people with, again, coming back to the double effect concept, that if you give them large amounts of drugs and they die, that's all right. And I think they blur the issue in that if you give the drugs and they're going to kill the patient, that's all right too. That's not euthanasia. So they don't go through the procedure or report these cases as euthanasia. Now, involuntary euthanasia, this is where you kill someone without their agreement or permission. That's 1,000 cases. And then the newborns. Several years ago, there was the Groningen protocol, which are guidelines set up for very disabled newborns. And this allows people to euthanize these newborns, and that has become accepted practice. Now, these are some of the reported figures of euthanasia, and as you see, they're going up. Now, there was an interesting paper in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in May 2010. Survey of Belgian nurses about practice of euthanasia, and it found in that study that they were involved in this. That was without the parameters, outside of the parameters of legal practice, and that of the cases, 47% were involuntary euthanasia. But these nurses were involved in it. And I'm sure that doesn't figure in the reporting of the cases from the Belgian government. So there's a lot happening which we don't know about. Now, this looks quite an innocuous picture, doesn't it? I think there are 6 VW vans barreled along a road somewhere in the Netherlands, so no problem. Got that. But these are from the mobile euthanasia units. Again, this is something which is just out this month. This has just started under the auspices of this Dutch association. And if a physician refuses to euthanize you, help you with assisted suicide, you can phone up this group, get online, and they will send one of those vans out with a physician and a nurse and all the equipment, and they will pop you off there and then. And it's free, and it's countrywide. So that's where they're going. Now, this paper came out from the Royal Dutch Medical Association in 2000 on the role of the physician. And they start off well enough. This is the last result. Make sure there are no alternatives. There has to be a medical basis. But then, talking about the medical basis, it becomes much broader. Psychiatric conditions, dementia, and as a geriatrician, I'm very interested in this one, geriatric afflictions. So if you have the giants of geriatrics, you're in Holland, go phone up your local mobile unit, will be around next day. And that's that. And this, I think, is very worrying. Unwilling physicians must refer patients to physicians who are willing to do this. So it's not just not good enough to say, I have a conscientious objection, I don't do this, you know, that. The Dutch Medical Association wants you to refer. And there are groups in the Netherlands now who are talking about the concept of suffering from life, or a completed life, or a done with life, and arguing that this should be good enough to have the euthanasia. And there was a former Dutch Ministry of Health who was advocating for suicide pills for the elderly, and there's another group who wants to have euthanasia for anyone over the age of 70 who feels that they have had a completed life and they're done with life. So it's a somewhat different picture there, one might like. Now, when arguing about this, the euthanasia proponents again are arguing in this favor of patient autonomy and control, and a counterbalance to medical power, which of course has been one of the underlying themes of this patient autonomy, and fair enough, we do have to have people taking more account of what is going on. And there is a concern about the overuse of technology, and you have to remember that about at least half of healthcare is spent on people who are dead within 2 years. And there's been an interesting study in New Brunswick recently where they carried out geriatric assessment of patients with a lot of disabilities and discussed with them what the options are and what medicine and technology can offer. And when people are presented with this, they have turned down a lot of the initiatives, and there has been a decrease in the use of technology and interventions there. So I think that's something that we can look at. Again, there's the concept that we can't treat a lot of these symptoms. A lot of people are dying in excruciating pain. That's not true. They can, or in extreme circumstances, there's the concept of terminal sedation, where you have to render the patient unconscious to prevent them from suffering. So that is it. Then there's the concept there's no difference between what they call passive euthanasia, which to my mind is good medical care, concentrating and comfortable and removing medicine or burdensome treatments. And then they say it's happening anyway. People are doing this, so it's far better if you legalize it and so on and you can regulate it. But what we've seen in other countries, and I'll give you an example in Belgium, it's not being well regulated. Things are happening. Of course, from a Catholic point of view, thou shalt not kill seems a fair enough argument against all this, but presented this from a secular point of view of one of our rounds of the hospital, a society's responsibility to protect life, and the health profession's role to provide care. I think it's very difficult to ask anyone in the healthcare field to move from a caring role to actively kill your patient. It's, again, something like the double effect. I mean, I'm quite prepared to give someone a seriously strong drug, but with the concept of helping them and their symptoms, the fact it might have side effects that may shorten their life is not relevant. But I see a major difference between that and giving them the drug with the intent of killing them. I think it would certainly change the physician-patient relationship, going back to the concept of the white coat of the healer or the black hood of the executioner, and certainly vulnerable groups risk. And the anti-euthanasia proponents are now harping on this concept of elder abuse. We have an aging population. A lot of them are being vulnerable. A lot of them are at risk of financial scams, people taking their money, and if somebody stands to inherit a large amount of money, it might be quite nice if they would speed up that process. I think we've seen many examples of this slippery slope in the power of abuse, and it certainly gives rise to increase in medical power. And you must remember, physicians are fallible. People can get better. And a lot of these people who ask for assisted suicide and euthanasia are depressed. And often that isn't either identified or treated. So a lot more could be done. So I think key points of euthanasia at the moment are illegal. We have to have a compassionate response aiming at limiting suffering. And we do have to emphasize the need for excellent end-of-life care and palliative care. We've got some excellent examples of that in Canada, in Toronto, Tammy Latler Centre at Mount Sinai, and some of the excellent units in our teaching hospitals, but varies very widely over the country, so we've got to look at that. Now, the next few slides are taken from a document, Recovering Our Traditions, a Catholic, Roman Catholic approach to end-of-life care, which was adapted by Moira, who's both a geriatrician and a Jesuit, who has both here in Toronto, and you can access that in the URL shortly. But it sort of can be a request for help, and we have to look into these various issues to help with it. And they do identify a 6-step protocol, clarifying the requests, looking at causes, etc., which you can look at for yourself. And it's the URL, I haven't got it there, is www.epec.org.
Could you repeat that a little louder?
If you Google it, you get to it. It's a bit difficult to find it now because they've got all sorts of different topics, and you've got to go under other departments or something. Click on that, and then you'll find it there. And in conclusions, we do have to have better quality of care, and we do have to have better services so that our vulnerable populations don't feel that they have lost this autonomy and this dignity, and that they are being provided by society. And ageism is a big part of that. Now, if the legal situation is changed, and I hope it won't be, but I think we're probably very careful about that, we really have to make sure that those of us who don't want to take part in this do have some protection. Now, it's going to be different from the abortion issue because there are a number of physicians who actually are trained to do gynecological procedures. They're not very great. But in this assisted suicide, family physicians, internists, geriatricians, surgeons could all be involved. And it's not only physicians, but we have the pharmacists who are prescribing the medications, the nurses who are involved as well. So this is a much broader issue. And then if you want to know more about this, if you go on the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, you will find out up-to-date information as this occurs on a daily basis. Let's say Alex Schellenberg had an article today. They do have legal representation of all these cases I've been discussing, and I know he's always looking for money, so I'm sure if you sent him some, he'd be very pleased. And I'll just conclude with a quotation from a former Lord Mayor of Dublin, Thomas Curran: "The price that God has placed on liberty is eternal vigilance." I really think we have to exercise a lot of diligence if we're not to be overcome by assisted suicide becoming legal in this country. Thank you very much. Thank you.